All right, hello and welcome to our BensonLive webinar, The Future of the Industry is Female, in recognition of the fact that March is Women's History Month. I'm Thea Schlendorf from Benson Marketing Group, and we are here with four wonderful panelists from our roster of clients today to talk not only about some of their experiences within the industry in the past, but also issues that they are looking towards that will be affecting the industry in the future. A couple of housekeeping items. One, know that this is being recorded, and we'll share a link to this recording with you after the fact. So if there are things that you want to go back and revisit, or if anyone has missed it, they can watch it later on. We also have a Dropbox file that will contain different assets and materials about each of our panelists, this presentation, and of course, some of the details about the products in question. Speaking of those, you are welcome to taste along as we talk, as each of these panelists introduce themselves. They'll talk a bit about the product that you've received from their brand, but you are also welcome to perhaps save that and do it at another time that works better for your schedule. So. That being said, let's kick things off. I'm going to turn it over to the folks to begin to introduce themselves, and we will go live to South Africa with Elunda Basson of Steenberg Vineyards. Elunda, take it away and tell us a little bit about yourself, Steenberg, and the sparkling Sauvignon Blanc that we have today.
Thank you so much, Thea and the Benson team, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's a real privilege for me to be joining you from a continent far, far away, but in the presence of great company and some really strong female leadership and winemakers and distillers in your industry. And as Steenberg Vineyards, we're just privileged to be part of this panel tonight. My name is Elunda Basson, and I've been the Cellarmaster and the Chief Operating Officer for Steenberg Vineyards since June 2019. And Steenberg has an incredible history that dates back to the late 1600s, where in 1682, we were actually the first claimed farm in South Africa. And we have an incredible female history in that the original owner from the late 1600s was a female, a young German widow by the name of Katharina Ras. And to this day, we live in her legacy and her courageousness and her bravery. And we have a very strong female leadership in the team at Steenberg Vineyards. We have a beautiful golf estate, some incredible hospitality spaces, small boutique, hotel, spa, 2 restaurants, and then the winery. And then maybe just a little bit about the wine that we're drinking, something quite unique in the sparkling wine category in South Africa, in that it is a Sauvignon Blanc, a sparkling Sauvignon Blanc, but it's not carbonated as Sauvignon Blanc traditionally is in South Africa, but rather it's bottle fermented, in the same method as method Champenois, except that we use Sauvignon Blanc instead of the traditional Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, or Pinot Meunier grape varieties. So it's a bottle fermented Sauvignon off the estate, and it's a beautiful, unique wine in the sparkling category. It represents everything that's beautiful about Sauvignon Blanc, and Sauvignon Blanc being the leading grape variety for Steenberg brand, located in the Constantia area, kind of the little wine route in the city center of Cape Town. So thank you so much, and hopefully you guys will have an opportunity to enjoy the sparkling a little later.
Absolutely. So next, as you may have guessed, we're going to go through these things in the order of as you might be tasting them. So next up, we've got Kathleen Murphy from Purple Brands, who is going to tell us a bit about herself, Purple, and the Rayburn Chardonnay.
Hi, everybody. Yeah. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Elunda, I have not tried your wine yet, but I have to say I'm very excited to try that one. I'm saving it. So my name is Kathleen Murphy. I have been in the wine and spirits industry for 22 years now. Almost for a little bit over half of my career has been on the international side, working with the big boys. So working at Gallo, at Diageo, at Campari. And then for the last 8 years, I've been domestic in the US, working at Constellation, Francis Ford Coppola, and now for a year at Purple Wine and Spirits. Purple is owned by a gentleman named Derek Benham. We're a medium-sized wine and spirits organization. And Derek has a long-standing history of innovating and developing and selling off brands. So we're a smaller portfolio, but a really mighty portfolio. And the wine that we sent to you is my personal favorite in the portfolio. It's called Rayburn, and I hope that everyone has seen it. And maybe had a chance to try it. So Rayburn is a brand that has been dedicated to Phyllis Benham, who is Derek's mom. And she's now well into her 90s, and she is a force to be reckoned with. She still very much tells him what to do. It's great to see the kind of the relationship that the two of them have together. But this wine, I've worked at a lot of places, and always, you'll say, this brand is on fire. And yeah, sometimes they are. This one, let me tell you, it's actually really on fire. It is in the coveted $15 to $20 space. It is the number 5 Chardonnay SKU. And within that space, it is the number 1 fastest growing in retail value, and then also in volume. And you'll taste it and you'll see consumers love it. It's 100% Chardonnay. This one is from Russian River Valley. It's whole cluster pressed. It's 25% in stainless steel, and then 75% oak fermented and aged, and then blended at the end. And it's a really beautiful wine. Like Elunda said, it's a beautiful wine, and it's complex, but yet it's balanced and it's elegant. And I hope that you enjoy it.
Great, thank you. Moving on, we are going to come to another area of California with Susan Doyle of Riboli Family Wines. Susan, take it away. Tell us about yourself and Riboli and the San Simeon Cabernet that we have.
Certainly. I joined the Riboli family in August of 2021. Obviously, from my accent, I'm from Australia originally, moved to the US in 2003 to head up McMurray Ranch, and then worked for Diageo Chateau and Estate Wines as their director of winemaking, both within the US and externally. So had Italy, New Zealand, and some of my older stomping grounds along with South America. So joined the Riboli family, and the Riboli family have the San Simeon brand. We have the Riboli family were established in 1917. So they are one of the oldest American existing wine families in the country today that still actually have the original winery in Los Angeles, but moved into the Paso Robles region around about 20 to 30 years ago. And they now have 5 vineyard properties that we've been farming. So we're around 99% of our own internal fruit sourcing. And Madalena, the matriarch, which we have one of the vineyards, not the vineyard that you see in the background today, but she will turn 100 next year. And she is still leading the charge with our sales and marketing team, and conducting Zooms during COVID to sell the wonderful wines, and is a magnificent, wonderful, thoughtful lady that's obviously experienced a lot in her time heading up the family business as it is today. So we have the Cabernet Sauvignon, which is from a warmer area, from San Simeon. We're coastal. We're about 30 miles from the California coast. And so we do see a lot of influence from coastal cool afternoon sea breezes, which helps us dramatically. So very similar to the Napa Valley, but a little more earthiness than I say that you would see versus the big reds where I've worked in the past. So enjoying the refinedness. We have a mixture of Bordeaux blends. So this one's a pure Cabernet Sauvignon, but we do have others where we have all other 5 varietals. We do produce whites, Sauvignon Blanc, but we have Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from our northern properties up in Monterey. So hopefully you enjoy the Cabernet, whether it be on a warm, hot, sunny day out in the sunshine, or whether you're actually suffering on the East Coast from some of those storms, then it might be an excuse to hide inside and enjoy and pull a cork on that one.
Definitely. And last but certainly not least, and my apologies, I have a major typo on this slide, which obviously Susan is not with Biltmore Winery, but with Riboli family wines. That is my fault. Moving along though to our final panelist, certainly last but not least, is Lauren Patz with Redwood Empire. Let me get Lauren pinned here. And obviously we're moving to spirits with this one. So Lauren, please take it away. Tell us a little bit about yourself and about Redwood. There you are. Let's pin you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Patz. I'm the head distiller for Redwood Empire Whiskey. I've been with the company just over a year now, but I've been distilling for the past 10 years or so. I'm quite honored to be included in this lineup of, wonderfully established and talented women, and excited to have a spirit component to this tasting as well. I grew up in the Napa Valley to winemaking parents, so even though I'm pretty heavily entrenched in spirits with my own career, it's actually quite fun for me to have an opportunity to talk with fellow winemakers and also just to taste through some wines, because it can get deep into the cocktail, neat whiskey drinking for me in particular. Today we're going to be drinking, or maybe not today, whenever you choose, the Redwood Empire Pipe Dream Bourbon, which is one of our 3 main SKUs. So we have a rye whiskey, a bourbon, and then a blended whiskey. And so this Pipe Dream is really lovely expression of what you would expect from bourbon. It has like a creamy softness on the palate, and a richness that really comes from the range of years that are being pulled in to create this blend. So for Pipe Dream, it's anywhere from 4 to 12 year, and includes a variety of different years in there, and it kind of allows it to be a little bit more complex, a little bit more depth, but still have some nice subtlety as well. And I hope we like it.
Definitely. All right. Now that we know a little bit more about everyone, we're going to get into the meat of our discussion, and I'm just going to get everyone's feeds pinned up here so that we can see everyone at the same time. One more, looking for here. There she is. All right. Okay, so to kick off our discussion now, we're going to open it up with the question to our panelists, which is, do you feel there is still a barrier for women in the industry? And Susan, I'm going to pick on you to get us started, because you had a great point. We had a sort of a pre-discussion, of course, before we were doing this today, and so I have the sneak peek on some of the great thoughts that these women have. So Susan, I'm gonna pick on you to kick us off with that answer.
Sure. It's interesting. I was reading a comment from a girlfriend that had been sent earlier in the week, and it was stating, in the future, there will be no female leaders. There will just be leaders, by Sheryl Sandberg. And it followed a comment very similar to the women in wine industry, which was a study that was conducted in 2017 of women in the industry, both in winemaking, viticulture, and operations, marketing, sales. And of 106 wineries that were over 10,000 cases, 47% of the producers, of which are about 1,000 of the executives, that exist in the wine industry or in the spirits industries today, only 38% of women hold leadership roles, which is certainly an improvement from a generation or even a decade ago. But in this day and age, it's still quite low. And the numbers still diminish, more so once you start looking at actual VP titles and CEO, OO roles. So there's still a lot of improvement that we can move forward with, and that it's a lot better than when I first arrived in this country in 2003, and it's certainly a lot better than it is in South, the Southern Hemisphere in Australia and New Zealand. But I also feel that as women, we're forging the way. We've had wonderful women as leaders for us in particularly the US industry, and so I think it's up to us to help lower some of those barriers that we still may be seeing and existing in the industry, and continue to forge and rattle that glass ceiling, as we say.
For sure. And you mentioned the Southern Hemisphere. So next I'm going to look to Elunda to give us the South African perspective here.
Yeah. So as mentioned in our pre-conversation, I definitely support what Susan's saying, especially in the space of very senior leadership and management in industries. And I think the South African picture is fairly similar in that, that a small percentage of senior level positions are still not being filled by women. But I think the more that ladies do step up into those roles, the more younger women are empowered by examples and especially mentors in their industries, and especially the wine industry, that have gone before and made an impact and help bring that change about. I think if we look at the nature of especially agriculture, and agriculture being one of the oldest industries in the history of the world, it has a very kind of been seen as being quite traditional and set in its ways. Yet I'm very happy to say that I've found that the wine industry and especially certain leading wine brands, and I'm proud to say that I consider Steenberg to be one of those brands, have been seen to be very progressive and welcoming of women and the influence of women in the agriculture workplace. And just the other day, I had colleagues currently in the wine industry, but previously from other industries, mention that how kind of embracing our environment and the wine environment is of diversity. And I think that's a big compliment for the South African wine industry.
For sure. Another question I wanted to put out there is whether you had a mentor or a piece of advice, for example, that you'd been given early on that's really stuck with you. And on this one, I'm gonna pitch it to Lauren, because she had such a great story about some of her own experience.
Yes, unfortunately, I didn't have a mentor, but I did have a lot of inspiration. And so seeing women like Hendricks's head distiller, Leslie Gracie, and seeing these women in these higher level positions, particularly in production, but certainly across the board throughout the company, has been a real inspiration for me to see that there's a place for women, there's opportunities there for us to continue to grow career-wise. And I know, we started off with that wonderful quote about in the future wanting to be recognized as just leaders, not necessarily female leaders. But I think right now, when we do have so much room to go till we get to that point, it's important to take ownership of being a woman and being in these positions, because it really supports that next generation coming up. It gives them confidence that they can make it to the same heights that some of the other women have achieved before them. So that's something that I really valued. Seeing women in these positions was really comforting and inspiring to me. One of the things I found so fascinating about the company that I was in before, At Spiritworks Distillery, we were almost 100% women. And it was every time we were looking to hire on new staff, either sales, marketing, or production, or tasting room, pretty much every department, the resumes that we would receive were overwhelmingly female. Like probably 80% of the resumes we received were female applicants. And, you know, it just showed me not only is there this huge interest out there, but, you know, there's a potential for women not necessarily feeling like comfortable applying to some of those positions. And I think because we were so heavily women dominated, it just made those women be like, yes, this is a company that respects women in this industry, that will promote from within and allow them to kind of build a career within, you know, a traditionally male-dominant industry. So that was something that I really thought was fascinating. I mean, we got a lot of questions like, why do you only hire women? But it truly was just the fact that almost all of our applicants for positions were female.
Yeah. Any other mentor stories or pieces of advice that anyone has to share?
It was interesting. When I first arrived in the country, I was so lucky to be able to meet Heidi Barrett and meet Selma Long and some of the wonderful women that have gone before us in the California wine industry. And I can remember talking with Heidi because up until about 2-3 years ago, she still held the most scores for any winemaker, not just as a woman winemaker, but any winemaker in the US for scores over 92 points. And she was always very humble. And she said, always work hard, stand your ground, and follow your heart. Do what you believe in. And I felt that she had obviously lived that through her career. And I've passed that along to many young women when they ask me the same, whether it be sales, marketing, viticulture, or winemaking. It's know the value that you bring to the table and be respectful, but don't back down, you know.
For sure. And a long career at that for her. So on that subject, looking at perhaps how the industry has changed over time, I'm going to kick this one to Kathleen to start us off, because you had some good reminiscences about what some of those rooms, what some of those tables looked like, a few years ago when you were at Gallo, and I'd love for you to share those thoughts with us.
Yeah, sure. Not on mute, I might know. So my first job, I was at Gallo, and I was a brand manager. And there were plenty of females at a brand manager level. You still find that today. So this was back in '99. But what I did know, it was very obvious that when I would get into any meeting that had senior leadership, there weren't any women. That was really obvious to me. And you flash forward about 10 years, and I was at Diageo. So it's about 2010. I was a global brand director on Johnnie Walker. And it was like from one day to the next that Diageo suddenly realized that 51% of the population is female. And it triggered a whole lot of internal work streams. But here's the thing. It didn't, and it was actually a book that was called The 51% Minority. But here's the thing. It didn't trigger work streams to bring in more female leadership. What it actually did was establish the big burning business question. Are we building relevancy with 51% of the consumers? And are we tapping into that associated, pocketbook, that, the spend value of the 51% of the consumer set of females? And a number of work streams happened, particularly with these brands that are more seen as more masculine brands. So Johnnie Walker, Kettle One, Guinness, a lot of money flowed into making sure that they could build meaningful campaigns or products that addressed what females' needs. And a lot of companies started doing this about the same time. It wasn't just the Diageo thing. It was a lot of different larger organizations within BevAlc that was doing this. And it was also kind of like the genesis of a number of really clunky products that came out. And I'm sure everyone can kind of remember some of the products or campaigns that were almost, they were kind of embarrassing because they played almost painfully to the female stereotype. That's since evolved. That's changed. Things are more integrated. But probably the best result out of that was that it really forced Diageo and other companies to look internally at their employee base and realize that they needed to diversify their employee base and to promote from within and to hire females, a more diversified employee grouping, so that they could be more effective to build better products and experiences for a diversified consumer landscape. So, I think change happens slowly, but I was very impressed with how fast things changed at Diageo back in 2010 to about 2014. And when I left, there was the global chief marketing officer was a female. So things are moving.
And I think a few others of you have seen things like that as well. I know, Susan, you mentioned seeing more inclusivity developing in large part because of some of the technologies that we have. Would you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking back, as I mentioned the other day, about where with women winemakers, we're still in 2017 only around 28% of the actual industry in California. Overall, women in winemaking across the US, it's only 18%. And with viticulture, as things are changing, not just running up and down the roads with the tractors, that more of the women that are now coming up through wineries and vineyards in particular. Up until 2017, there was nobody that had a title above viticultural or a VP of viticulture. And a girlfriend's just recently moved across to Phil Katuri as the COO. She just left Gloria Ferrara as the general manager. So she's the first one probably in this country, literally in the last 3 weeks, that's actually changing that statistic, which is wonderful. And I think with modern day technology that we're now embracing in vineyards and winemaking, it's freeing us up to not just deal with the cultural, but also the physical that perhaps limited us in the past, of being able to grow up through the ranks and come up through learning the skill set from the ground up all the way now to being able to hold down those positions.
Yeah. Lauren, you had a great point about transparency, the sort of increase there.
Particularly within spirits, over my time working these past 10 years or so, I've seen this huge shift in kind of how the outreach happens to our community, both trade and consumers. And I think both now expect a certain level of transparency, not only within the production process and knowing much more about what goes into the products that are being consumed, but also the company as a whole, like not just employees, but also the company's ethics and kind of what role they're taking to better the world, if any. And those are playing stronger and stronger in market. And I also give inspiration to people who care about those types of things, like myself. So it's nice to see this drive towards having eyes on who is on the management side of companies. Are there minorities represented? It's not just women that I think are lacking within our industry. And so I think that this kind of push towards visibility internally is something that is different than it has been in the past. And it is an opportunity to kind of move that agenda forward, and also just kind of another layer of accountability there, and just getting those numbers from different from different kinds of testing and things like that about how many women are involved on upper level management levels, and we have access to that information in a way that I don't think we really had in the past.
Yeah, I think I wanted to insert a question here that's coming through the chat. I think Elunda's just already started to answer that question. Maybe you'll pick it up and share your response verbally. But the question is, because we have been talking about, you know, some of your cumulative experiences, which come across different roles and different companies that you've been a part of. So the question is, you know, what have been some of the drivers that have led you to make moves within the industry from one company to another or one brand to another? Why don't you start us off, Elunda?
Okay, so if I look at other strong women in the wine industry, I think one kind of characteristic that we all share usually is that women in the wine industry know what it is to work hard. I think we're quite passionate about agriculture and working with plants and people, and the passion really comes through in the art of winemaking, I believe. I don't consider myself to be an extremely artistic person, but definitely in terms of my creative space that allows me to make beautiful wines, that is in itself a very creative space. And I just in my own career over 26 years in the South African wine industry, I've just been enjoying the diversity of the wine industry, the fact that we have 4 different climatic seasons in every 12 months, the fact that in 26 years I've probably have never had exactly the same copy and paste experience in any of the vintages that I've been involved with. Even if you make the same wine from the same block of vineyards, in every season, the wine tastes differently. So I think people in the wine industry and strong women in the wine industry enjoy diversity. And in my career, that's definitely been part of what drives me. I need to be stimulated. I enjoy different kinds of interactions on a daily basis. And I'm really passionate about people. And so part of my winemaking career has always been to try and promote myself by developing my skill set, by adding more value to the business and the company that I'm involved in, and to eventually, at the age where I am at in the South African wine industry right now, try and be a leader and a mentor to younger people and the younger generation in the wine industry, male or female, and to just help create a better world, just a nicer place where we all are celebrated for being different, but allowed to have the freedom to enjoy our passion for wine.
For sure. Anyone else have a comment on that one?
It's nice to see the change. I think back to when I started out in the Australian wine industry 35 years ago. And I shared with you the joke that I stood up in front of a dinner presentation, and I was asked what wines I made, and I passed the comment that I'd made a Cabernet Sauvignon, and a gentleman had roared out, "Well, but you're a woman." And I diffused the situation by joking and saying, yes, I was this morning in the shower, and that I make wines that are white wines and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And so I think back to that, to when I was then at Diageo many years later. And I find it interesting, particularly that we allow people in the vineyard to have their dogs, but we don't necessarily encourage them to bring their children. And thankfully that's changed a lot. And we had a lot of young moms that were coming up through the ranks, both when I was at Gallo and at Diageo. And they'd say, well, you know, I have my daughter or my son, and what am I going to do? I can't come into work. And I would say, don't be silly, bring them in. We allowed dogs. The child's, you know, probably more responsible and reliable than the dog. I don't want to see it on a leash, but, you know, it was just that difference of attitude from when I'd first started out 35 years ago, where if you were marrying in the wine industry, they let you go. And I actually had that conversation in Australia. And that was part of the reason why I left Australia and the wine industry back then to move to America, because it was more inclusive. But when I was at Diageo, we actually also encouraged women not to give up their careers when they had their second child, but to look at job sharing. And I had a number of people, both in the vineyards and in the labs, that actually would come in for 2 days a week and then hand over to somebody else for 2 days a week, so that they could still keep their hand in if they chose to do that.
Just one real quick comment. Susan, I want to say thank you, because I was one of those children in the vineyards. So that was a real formative part of growing up and, you know, taking sugars and, you know, sorting fruit and, you know, being at the winery and stuff like that. So I definitely reaped the benefits of that change in mindset for sure.
I just want to add on to that as well. So I frequently bring my daughter to work, like during summer vacations and stuff, and she hangs out. I think it's really good for children to see what their parents, particularly their moms, are doing. I always encourage it. And moreover, so I have 2 girls, an 11 and a 13-year-old, and I just look at the education that's happening now, and they're growing up to that there aren't taboos. Everything's possible. You know, diversity is absolutely the norm for them. And I just think of like the future in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, like what we're experiencing, like this is going to happen. That we're going to be in a place, Susan, where it's not about having female leadership. It's about having leadership. I firmly believe that. And I believe I have such faith in this generation that's being raised right now, that they're going to get us across that finish line.
Yeah, I think we're all hopeful that is in fact the future we're going to see. I want to switch things a little bit, not the perfect segue, but I think this is an important question for conversation, which is talking about some of the current issues affecting the industry that you find to be most pressing to your business, because, you know, obviously within the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of things pop up that have really changed and affected not only this industry, but our lives. So whether this is something supply chain related, climate change related, pandemic related, what are some of the things that are really pinging you at the moment? And Lauren, I know you were quick to point out supply chain, so why don't we start there?
Yes, I mean, I think supply chain might be the most obvious of things that we're all, I mean, I would assume all of us are having some difficulty with. Glass in particular is pretty tricky, but you know, from a whiskey standpoint, grain prices are significantly up right now with the conflict in Ukraine and all of this other stuff going on. It's kind of shocking how much what's happening in the world changes, you know, what happens on the scale of just making things within your own space and your own distillery. So certainly supply chain is a pretty difficult thing, but I'd say kind of just industry-wide, one of the struggles or one of the things that I come up against within spirits is this base level of knowledge. With spirits, I think that while people are much more excited and open to asking questions and admitting that they don't know everything that has to do with spirits, and there's this kind of energy around education and learning, I still think we have a long way to go to kind of bring that knowledge to consumers so that they can appreciate the products that we're making as much as possible. So, explaining that whiskey is this umbrella term, and that rye and bourbon and single malt kind of live within this realm altogether, and what makes them different, and what are their defining features, and what makes them similar. I think that while there's this interest for it, that we still have a long ways to go until everyone's kind of on that same level of understanding, spirits as a baseline.
True. And Susan, you had some thoughts about how some of the different categories of wines have really risen from not really being on people's radars to suddenly really taking over the industry in some ways.
I think it's a mixture of change in style. You look back to when I first arrived and the more traditional styles, and we're going through lower alcohol choices or no alcohol choices, which is great. You think back to the skinny wine that started probably about 10 years ago. And we all sort of scoffed about that. Yes, we're all counting calories, but they are very yummy wines, if you want to say, that are being produced now. And it's not just in the traditional form of in a bottle. You're seeing them in cans and Tetra Paks and with different closures. And I think it's going to certainly help revolutionize the wine industry, that we don't think about it just in a staid traditional way, whether it be from champagne all the way through to the different sparkling options that we see today as well. So it gives me hope that not only do I not have to worry about the amount of extra sugar in the wine anymore, that if I'm counting how much sugar I don't want in my life, but it's more about that there's more opportunity, and it's encouraging, it's academic, it's bringing more people in to think about it from a different perspective as well.
Yeah, and that's a great segue. Kathleen, you were the first one to really ping that sort of health and wellness, the way that specter of things has begun to show itself within the industry. Would you expand upon that?
Yeah. I'm in line with what Susan's saying. The real opportunity for innovation, and I love to hear that people are embracing it as an innovation opportunity, because health and wellness, it is here to stay. Consumers want transparency; they want healthier options, and I'm sure there's not a winery anywhere that in the last 5 years hasn't looked at the phenomenon, what's going on with seltzers, or even with the introduction of legalized cannabis, that have said, oh gosh, what does this mean for us? What do we do? And, as business leaders, we need to ask ourselves, are we going to put our head in the sand, or are we going to address it and look to diversify our portfolio? My job before this one, I was working with Francis Ford Coppola, and my sole job was to basically future-proof his company. So he has a, very sizable, or just sold it, but, a sizable wine business. And, we created a cannabis business, and we created a spirits business. And then looking at the health and wellness avenue, we were one of the first group of brands to come out with a lower calorie, lower alcohol wine in 2019. So there was a real appetite for looking at how are consumers' desires changing, what are their motivations, and how do you meet them through innovation. Now at Purple, we're a little bit, I'd say we have less appetite to go after the health and wellness space, but I will charge on.
It's interesting also, just jumping in on that, when I was at Spring Mountain as the GM winemaker, we were organic, and there were not a lot of organic properties in the US at the time. And definitely seeing more of that. It's not just about sustainability, but how we're farming our base ingredients, whether Lauren's probably seeing this too for a lot of their products. But we've just recently purchased another brand called Jada that we're going to be certified organic. They'd been working towards that for 2 years. And you're seeing the millennials certainly more interested and intrigued with not just organic and sustainability, but all the other forms that you can move into. And I think that's also part of that younger generation being more open to holistic opportunities within this industry as well that's going to keep us on our toes. And we're actually, that's only a 50-acre property, but we're now talking about merging one of our 250-acre properties over to organic as well.
And Lauren, in our previous discussion, I really loved your thoughts. You know, wine is one thing, but thinking about how the low and no alc category affects the spirit space is sort of something different. And I just loved your response. So would you share it?
I do have some strong feelings about it. I pretty much always have strong feelings. The artist and hedonist inside of me is horrified by what this means and like what those actual products are. The scientist and like the analytical, the logical side of me is fascinated. Love this challenge of like trying to do things on a chemical level and still make good products. So it's a back and forth internally, but I'll admit that several years ago when Seedlip first came out and called itself the first non-alcoholic spirit, I was so angered because that word spirit in my mind, it means alcohol. It means this is something that has a huge amount of tradition, a huge amount of craft, a huge amount of effort behind it. And so I felt like it was almost an appropriation of our word to sell a product that is absolutely not a spirit. So that was the hardest thing. I mean, it has nothing to do with the quality of the product itself. I mean, I enjoy low alc and no alc cocktails quite a bit actually, because I'm about flavor and profile and story, and all of those things absolutely resonate with me. But from a production standpoint and like where my heart is, it was hard to see some of those things when they were first coming out. But now it is more of like a puzzle box that you are trying to figure out or solve. And that challenge can be almost as fulfilling as the, you know, sensual gratification of decadence, I would say, you know, for sure.
Very true. And I think it's also important for us to keep in mind that, well, to not let ourselves be US centric here, that this category, this shift in preferences and looking for these types of products is not necessarily a US phenomenon. Elunda, I know South Africa has started to consider that as well, maybe with the catalyst being slightly different, but tell us about that.
Yes, definitely. So in the last 2 years, it was kind of a way into a new category where literally we were fighting for survival for the entire alcoholic beverage industry in South Africa, because probably, as most of you know, I think we ended up in an average of about 5 months in the last 2 years, where the government called a ban on local alcohol sales in South Africa during different levels.
I think she's frozen for a minute, but I will venture to put words in her mouth and just say that what she's saying is that the country of South Africa imposed a certain amount of bans, not only on alcohol consumption, but also on exports as well. The whole industry was really affected for significant periods of time. Looks like we've got her back, so I'm going to let her finish that thought.
I was rambling on, and then I spotted everyone was kind of frozen and no one's paying attention. So yeah, just in summary, the no-low category was created out of desperation in an attempt for South African producers to try and utilize high stock levels of alcoholic beverages in all sorts and kinds, whether it was beer related or ciders or wine based. And we were forced into creating non-alcoholic products that could be traded during the alcohol bans. And The alcohol bans had a devastating effect on our industry, but it did plunge us into this super creative space. As Lauren said, it scares us, and Steenberg's definitely in the same space as Kathleen and her brand, where we decided strategically not to venture into that space, but our bigger business did successfully venture into non-alcoholic sparkling wines, and that fascinating innovation space where you're trying to make the best version of that product available on shelf, and not have to be embarrassed as a winemaker, and be confident that you've made the best product possible, even if it doesn't contain alcohol anymore. And for Steenberg, it was a hard period where we couldn't sell locally because we're a very strong and well-supported local South African wine brand, but it did challenge us to think innovatively about our export markets, and we're just so happy to be able to look back and say that we've actually managed as a brand to grow our export volumes, and that's been our saving grace.
Coupled with the fact that all data points to a real surge in sparkling wine consumption, which is obviously a great benefit to you, and coupled with the interest in real discoveries in wine. The traditional method sparkling Sauvignon Blanc that you produce really fits that well. So looking forward to seeing a bounce back for all of South Africa, but especially you folks. As we are coming close to our 1 hour mark, I think the one question we certainly want to end things with, but we also, if there's more to say, please keep going. But the one question I think we do want to get in here towards the end is, how do we get more women into leadership roles in this industry? And I think, Lauren, whoever wants to kick this off.
Sure. I mean, for me, it's kind of like we need to be as visible as possible, because I think that's the one thing that we can do for all women in this industry. It's wonderful to act as a mentor. It's wonderful to reach somebody on a personal level and give them support as they make their way. But one thing we can do for all women in our industry is be visible representations of what's possible, and really just give them that sort of courage and incentive and drive to put in that hard work that is necessary to kind of achieve success within our industry. So, being a part of these types of panels, really being an advocate for your brands and for your work, I think that is something that can reach a lot of people and kind of get them over maybe some barriers for themselves about whether or not they want to pursue a career in this industry. So I think being visible and being present and being proud are all important things that we can do to help women continue to grow as a part of our industry, for sure.
Other thoughts on the topic?
I agree. I'm shocking. Whenever I go out, I try and keep business cards with me, and quite often with young graduates now, whether they be behind a bar, and quite often they ask what I'm doing as a career, and we chat because I'm often asking about wine. I drink spirits as well, love my gin. So Lauren, if you've got a gin, save some for me for my next trip home. It's often chat to them about what it's like to be in the industry, and answer them honestly, but then give them my business card and tell them to reach out to me, and that we may not necessarily have a job, but more than happy to help point them in the direction of perhaps someone that could get them a step in the door and start at that ground level and work their way up. I think also as we get older, there's certainly more. I belong to a women's GM group up in Napa that I'm still part of, even though I'm down here on the Central Coast. And it's just wonderful for that networking now that, you know, the good old boys clubs have had it. And so we as women have not been as good at doing that. And I think we need to certainly do that so that we can be supportive of each other rather than trying to find your way by yourself. Teams get there, and it doesn't necessarily mean the team that you work with.
So true.